In this lesson, I'm going to be taking a look at page 42 in the Alfred All-in-One Piano Book, and we're going to learn how to play What Can I Share and all of the new information that this page offers us. So one of the first things that you can notice, which is really more review than anything new, is that on this page you get to play these chords, the C major and the G7 chords, in the right hand in the first two systems, and then they switch over to the left hand in the final two systems. So we're going to review these two chords. The next thing, which is actually new, is recognizing the significance of this symbol right here, this extended line that covers the first four measures in this system, and then the four measures of the second system, both in the left hand, and then this same line appearing again to cover the right hand parts in the third and the fourth system. Now this line is called a slur, right there, slur. And what it tells you to do essentially is that all of the pitches that are underneath this line, so either in the left hand here or in the right hand there, are to be played connectedly or smoothly, or using the Italian term legato. As you can see here, it says smoothly connected. So let's talk about what that actually means, and I'll demonstrate this with the right hand part in system number 3. So let's just review what these pitches are. Treble clef, we start with E4, up a step to F4, up a step to G4, and then we leap down by a fifth from G down to C4. That's on the first ledger line below the staff, up a step in this measure to D4, and up a step again back to E4 where we started. So we, by this point, should be pretty comfortable with the rhythms, obviously with quarter notes or half notes, but the newer rhythm from earlier is that dotted half note, which is first introduced on page 40 with this piece Rockets. So review that lesson to be clear that the dotted half note is the equivalent of a half note tied to a quarter, which in itself is equivalent to 3 quarter notes. So when you have a time signature of 3/4 or 3 quarter notes per measure, that means that a dotted half note holds out for 3 complete beats or 3 complete quarter notes. In any case, so you recognize the notes and you also recognize the rhythms. So before I actually play this and then demonstrate what legato playing means, let's be sure that we're clear on the rhythms. So what I'd like to do is just speak the letters according to their rhythmic durations. So I've done this in other videos. Let me demonstrate that here now, just for the right hand. So 1, 2, and E, F, G, C, D, E, release. So it sounds a little funny the way I do it. I know I've commented on that quite a lot actually. But the point is to hold out these pitches for the correct rhythms. So let's demonstrate how that sounds when you're playing it. So the same third system with the right hand only. So the right hand is in C4 position. And let's just block out these notes first. So E4, up a step to F4, up a step to G4, and then I leap down a fifth to C4, and then back up a step to D4, and finally up a step to E4 where we started. Okay, so those are the notes in the right hand of this system, and now let's play them in time. So remember, there are quarters and there are dotted half notes. The dotted half notes are the equivalent of 3 quarters in duration. So 1, 2, and. Release. All right, let's do that one more time. And this time I'll count in 3 over the playing. So, and I'll snap as well. Why don't I just multitask? So 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Now the whole time that I've been playing this, I've actually been demonstrating legato playing. So what this means is that I connect every note to the next without lifting my finger off of the keyboard or creating any kind of aural or acoustic or sonic disconnect from one pitch to the next. So let's observe what that looks like mechanically. So if I start with E, and I'd like to play smoothly or connectedly or, again, legato to the next note F, what this means is I don't release my third finger from the E key until I make contact with F afterwards. So I have to let my finger actually touch the next key, and as soon as it does and I start depressing the F key, that's when I release my third finger. So it's going to look like this. Third finger first, I make contact with the next key and lift my third finger. The next key that I have to play is G above that F. So as soon as my fifth finger right there, my pinky, starts to make contact with this key and starts to depress this key, I lift my fourth finger from the previous F key. Okay, so the first three notes played legato, slowly, looks like this. So if you really want to feel this very, very precisely and carefully, then allow the pillow of your finger to really make contact with the key before you lift the previous finger. The pillow of my fourth finger makes contact with F, and I lift. The pillow of my fifth finger makes contact with G, and I lift. And demonstrated at a little bit of a faster tempo. And the same thing going forward, my thumb, here I'm gonna do something the pianists never do in playing. I'm gonna hide these fingers, as it were. So when my thumb comes down to C, so I make contact and then the previous finger lifts. And the same thing going forward from finger 1 to 2 and from finger 2 to 3. So all of that is legato playing. If I want to play non legato, which just means disconnectedly, I could just create small breaks from one note to the next, as in make a little break, make a little break. Okay? There are different ways of physically playing the piano. All of these characteristics that I'm describing, playing connectedly, legato, disconnectedly, non-legato, these all fall under the general category of articulation. So how you articulate at the piano is how you physically approach playing the piano. So for example, here is, again, legato, a non-legato articulation. Here is something called staccato, which kind of sounds like what it is, which are these really sharply delineated breaks from one pitch to the next. Right, you can see more of a lift from finger to finger. And there's also something called leggero or leggiero, which translates to lightly. And again, it's a non-legato, but a little bit more, well, lighter than the non-legato I'd shown you earlier. So it just means very lightly. And all these are ways of, again, articulating music at the keyboard. As far as this piece, What Can I Share goes, everything must be articulated legato, very connectedly. And when I say everything, what I mean specifically is all of the pitches underneath this slur or that slur, or the two slurs that occur, of course, in the right hand in the next two systems. If you look at the other parts that you're supposed to play, for example, these repeated chords, C or G7, you'll notice that, of course, there are no slurs there because you have to be able to lift if you're going to repeat the same chord. So for example, if I play the C major triad in my right hand, so remember, first finger on C, third finger on E, and fifth finger on G, and then I play it as a harmonic set of intervals, that is all at the same time. If I want to play that again, there's no way I can do this in a legato articulation because then I would essentially not be really lifting from the keyboard. And then how do I re-articulate this chord? It's just not really physically possible. So you have to lift, and that basically creates a non legato articulation. Same thing for the G7 chord. So my thumb is on B, fourth finger on F, and fifth finger on G, and the same thing, right? You have to lift, otherwise you just will get stuck on the keyboard because you think you have to play them legato, which, as far as I'm concerned, at this point in time, we're not going to do. All right, so in other words, whatever is melodic, like for example, going back to the third system, you already know what this right hand part sounds like, and the left hand is articulating the C chord, the G7, and then back to the C. You know that because you recognize the notation, but also the chord symbols above this system and above all the systems tell you which chords to play. So just very quickly before we go into a very detailed, a detailed explanation of how to play this piece, here's the third system. So 1, 2, and. You can see that the right hand is playing legato, while the left hand has to, by default, play non legato. Because I have to be able to play the chord twice. Okay, so that's the overview of the piece. Now that you have a little bit of it in your head, let's go through and work through it in detail. So once again, pieces like this seem intimidating at first because the entire piece takes up one whole page, and that's obviously more visually challenging than something like looking at rockets on page 40, which is only 2 systems or not even half the page. So going back to page 42, first of all, we know that we have 4 systems, system 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if you look really carefully, what you'll be able to see is that the first 2 systems are essentially the same. So let's make the observation where it's really clear. The right hand plays the C, G7, and C chords in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th measures. The same thing is true in system number 2, C, G7 in C, and C in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th measures. The left hand plays what really looks like pretty much an identical phrase. That's a new term here. It just means basically a unit of musical information. But the only difference is, at the end of the first system, the left hand comes to the note E, that's E3 on the 3rd space of the bass staff, whereas in the second system, the left hand returns back to C, the 5th finger. So let's just go through these notes and make sure that we can see that the left hand is essentially the same, with the one exception that the end of the first system is different than the end of the second system. So we know that this 3rd space is E, we go up a step to F, we go up a step to G, and then we leap down a 5th to C, step up to D, and step up to E. That should be really familiar to you because those are exactly the same pitches as we already described in the 3rd system with this right hand treble clef or treble staff part. So this is in the 4th octave. The same melody is here in the 3rd octave. Well, let's take a look at the pitches in the 2nd system in the left hand. Again, the same opening, E, up a step to F, up a step to G, down a leap of a 5th to C, up a step to D, and then down a step from D back to C. And I say back because the C was already played here. So let's just make sure we know what fingers to use here. So this is finger number 3. We go up a step to finger number 2, 1, then 5, 4, 3. Second system, 3, 2, 1, down to 5, 4, and then back down to 5. So let's play that. So I'm going to play the left hand for the first 2 systems. Here's system number 1. I'm going to block it out first without worrying about rhythm at all. So first it's E, finger number 3, up a step to F, finger number 2, up a step, finger number 1, and and then down a fifth to 5, up a step to 4, up a step to 3. And then the second system is, again, as I've been belaboring quite a bit here, the same, but at the end, instead of going to 3 on E, you go back down a step to C on finger number 5, or your pinky. All right, so let's play the first two systems, because by this point in your study of this book, you should be pretty comfortable playing more than one system at a time. So I'm going to play straight through from here through the end of the second system, counting the entire time. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 as I play. Just remember, as we have made it very clear, as I've made it very clear before, the dotted half note takes 3 quarter notes, or 3 beats in a 3/4 time signature. So here we go. The first two systems, left hand only. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Okay, so play that a couple of times to get used to it. In fact, let me do that one more time. This time I'm not going to count over it. I'll just provide you with this snapping beat, right? So I'll be the human metronome. And it's worth noticing that this is to be played at a mezzo forte dynamic, so moderately loud, and in terms of tempo, that is the rate of the beat, moderately slow. So here we go, first two systems. I'm not going to count, just provide you with this snapping metronome. 1, 2, and. Okay, so let's add the right hand part to it. So we already know what the right hand is supposed to play. We play the C major triad in these measures, the second and fourth in both systems, and in between that G7 chord. So just a very quick review. As I've already done earlier in this lesson, here's the C major triad, 1, 3, and 5 in the fourth octave, C, E, and G. Lift slightly so that you know where to go for the G7. Remember that your thumb moves down a half step from C down to B. Your fourth finger is on F, and your fifth finger is on G. Lift slightly and make sure your hand position goes back to the C major triad. So we go from a C major triad and root position. Review my prior videos. That just means that the lowest of the 3 notes arranged as skips is on the bottom in the bass. We go over to that G7 chord over B. That means that we have a first inversion tetrachord. Review those videos. And back to C. Okay, so to play the right hand by itself in time, we just have to remember that the downbeat, or the first beat, of each one of these measures has a quarter note or a 1 beat rest. So I'm going to count as follows. I'm going to play the first system with the right hand only, starting with measure number 1, where of course we rest. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, rest, play, play, rest, play, play, rest, play, play. Okay, so let's see how that goes. So starting with measure number 1, which essentially becomes a preparatory measure for the right hand. So 1, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3. Okay, let's do that one more time. 1, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3. Now, to coordinate the right and the left hands, why don't we begin by just working on each measure separately. So I'm going to play both hands in measures 2, 3, and 4 in the first system, And then you know that the difference between the first system and the second system is that the last note, instead of being E, is C. So I'll make a note of that. No pun intended, I promise. That was not intentional when I get there. So let's take a look at measure number 2 by itself. So this is in the first system. The left hand has the 5th finger on C3, and the right hand plays the C major triad twice. And the important thing to note, again, no pun intended, is that the left hand as a dotted half note stays down while the right hand plays. So listen again to this coordination. First the left hand, and then the right hand, and the left hand stays down the whole time. Okay? If you have any trouble with this, one thing that might simplify learning this coordination is actually to close the fallboard and try this out without the keyboard, just as an exercise in keeping the left hand down while the right hand plays. So you can sort of approximate the position of the 3rd and 4th octaves and do this. Right, you see how the left hand stays down? Of course, don't do this with your hand. This is not a karate chop, so to speak. It's not martial arts. You have to still maintain the correct position. So, okay, so be sure to try that if you need to just practice the coordination. But going back to the keyboard, let's try this measure, second measure of the first system in time. So 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's do that 2 more times. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Let's do that 1 more time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Let's do exactly the same thing with the third measure of the first system. So you move to D or 4th finger in the left hand and the G7 chord in the right. So here's D in the left hand, G7 chord. Again, it's the same issue of coordination. Keep the left hand down. So let's try that without worrying about timing just once. All right, just making sure the left hand stays down. And now let's try that in time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's do that 2 more times. We don't have to do this for every single system because there's so much repetition of the exact same chord and the same notes. We just have to do it once early on to get really comfortable. So 1 more time. Third measure of system number 1. 1, 2, and. Okay, and now let's move on to the 4th measure of system number 1. So back to the C major triad in the right hand and the 3rd finger on E in the left hand. So we're going to do this in 2 rounds. The first round, let's just get the coordination of left hand staying down while we play the right hand triad. So E in the left, C major triad in the right. That's round 1. And round number 2 is just to play this in time. So 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that was reasonably straightforward as long as we play each measure individually. The hard part, of course, is to play these all in a row and to be sure to play legato in the left hand and to also be able to execute the shift from the C major to the G7 harmonies in the right hand. So let's see how that goes. So I'm going to play measures 2, 3, and 4. The left hand plays 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The right hand plays 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Putting them all together, it sounds like this. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to play that one more time without counting over it. 1, 2, and. Okay, and now let's finally add the first measure so we can play all of this material in the left hand legato connectedly and coordinate the right hand over it. So this is the first system with both hands. 1, 2, and. Now, if you need the count over it, of course, you can always count yourself, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but here's what it would sound like with me doing it. So playing and counting over. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now I'm going to move on and play the second system because everything is the same. Again, you've heard me belabor this a bunch of times. Everything's the same except when I get to the end, my left hand returns to C on finger number 5. So this is what the left hand sounds like in system number 2, really quickly for review. 1, 2, and. 2, 3, back to 5, 2, 3, release, and the right hand is identical. We alternate from C to G7 and back to C. So that part you know. So here is a complete performance of the second system with both hands. I'm going to play this twice, once counting over it, and the second time I'll just play without any kind of external noise from me. Here we go. First time counting over it. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the second time, no counting. 1, 2, and. Okay, I think we're ready to try both systems in a row. So system 1, immediately followed by system number 2. So I'm going to play this twice, once with counting and once without. First time with counting. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, the second time, no counting. 1, 2, and. So that covers the first two systems, and in many ways that's actually the same. The same issues apply for the next two systems, where essentially the hands switch parts. So the melody, right, the succession of pitches was carried by the left hand playing legato in the first two systems, and now in the last two systems, it's the right hand playing that legato melody with a small change at the end, which we'll talk about momentarily. But looking at the next two systems, you can observe that if the right hand has the melody, the left hand plays the chords. So we'll review those chords in just a moment for the left hand. The other change is instead of the mezzo forte dynamic, now we have a piano dynamic. So from moderately loud to soft. And at the very end, we have an extra measure because so far each system has had 1, 2, 3, 4 measures. The last system, however, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the piece would otherwise end here. So what the authors of this music have done is they've extended the last measure with a tie. You can see that middle C, this first ledger line below the treble clef, ties over to middle C in this measure, which means that you do not play the C again. You simply continue to hold it for 3 additional beats. And the other change is instead of the rest on the downbeat of this measure, this final measure has just a dotted half note C major triad, which you play while the right hand sustains the C from before. So what I like to do is in fact just practice the last 2 measures so you can have a very clear separation in your head between what a slur is and what a tie is, because they kind of look the same. They're these extended lines that cover notes. So remember that a slur is an articulation. It tells you to play legato. or connectedly. A tie, on the other hand, is a rhythmic extension that can only connect the same pitch to that same pitch, or one pitch to that same pitch. So C4 can only be tied to itself because you're just saying, I'm going to continue holding this C4 for an additional 3 beats or 3 quarters. So remember that the basic definition of a tie is a rhythmic extension. I extend the rhythmic duration of this note by the rhythmic duration of that note to which it is tied. So let's play the last 2 measures. Let's begin very simply with the right hand only. So the right hand plays C4, the thumb on middle C, and I play it for 6 total beats, or 2 rounds of 3 beats each. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Right, that was easy. And now the left hand has that typical pattern of a chord arrest, 2 quarters, and then the dotted half note. So here is your C major triad in the C3 position, 5th finger on C, 3rd finger on E, and thumb on G. So here's the C major triad. And remember, you're playing a chord arrest, 2 iterations of the C major triad, and then in the final measure, a dotted half note for 3 full beats. 1, 2, 3, release. All right, so let's play those last 2 measures. They sound like this in time. 1, 2, and rest. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Let's try playing both hands in the last 2 measures. So it begins with the right hand on the downbeat, on the first beat, and then just holding. So remember this coordination. Right hand holds, and the left hand plays the C major triad. Okay, so I wasn't worried about counting, I was just worried about coordination. And remember, if you have any issues with this, put the fall board down and just play the right hand and keep it down, and then the triad in the left. And then release. So practice that a couple of times just to get the sense of coordination. Go back to the keyboard and let's play the last 2 measures of system number 4 in time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Okay, let's do that one more time and follow the instruction to slow down at the end, as it says slower. So that's really up to your discretion, so I'll do it my way, and I'll count over it so you can hear me slowing down the beats. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Okay, it'll make more sense in context, of course, but those are the last 2 measures of system number 4. Let's go through the rest of this, and then we'll put the entire piece together, and we'll be done with this particular lesson. So let's begin with the right hand, which we already reviewed. In fact, I started looking at this piece specifically at that spot. So by this point, you know what the pitches are, because the right hand pitches are exactly the same as the left hand pitches, just in the 4th octave instead of the 3rd. So let's not waste any time. Let's just play that right away. Here's the right hand of system number 3. I'm playing 3, 4, 5, down to 1, then up to 2, and then up to 3. All right, so let's play that in time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Let's take a look at system number 4. We know that it'll follow the same pattern, or we expect, I shouldn't say no. No, because I've already played this piece. But if you don't know it, just look. You play the same notes, E up to F, up to G, down to C, up to D, and then instead of going up to E, you go back down to C and you hold it as we've already explored and practiced. And as the left hand does in the second system, where D goes down a step to C instead of up a step to E right there. So let's play the last system in the right hand, and it sounds like this. And I'll do this in time because by this point, this is pretty familiar to you. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. You can hear I slowed it down because that's what the instructions indicate to do. So let's play the two systems back to back, the entire right hand melody part for the last two systems. Here we go. And remember, try to play this piano or softly. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Okay, so the right hand is done. Let's take a look at the left hand in slightly more detail. So you already know what the C major chord looks like in the left hand, 5, 3, and 1 on C, E, and G. You also know what the G7 chord is because the fifth finger extends down a half step to B. The second finger is on F. The first finger is on G. Remember that acronym BFG, Big Friendly Giant. And right back to C. So as a warm-up, it might be useful to play the C major chord twice. Lift, switch over your hand position to G7. Don't forget to move the fifth finger down to B. Lift and come right back to C. Okay, so let's try an exercise that's very similar to what we had done in the top system. So here I was just playing each measure individually, so I'm going to do that just once for the third system. So let's begin with measure number 2 of system 3. Right hand plays on the thumb, first finger on C4. Left hand plays the C major triad twice. Okay, and remember the coordination. Right hand stays down, left hand repeats the chord. Let's play that measure in time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, release. Go on to the next measure, measure 3 of system 3. Right hand plays 2 on D. The left hand switches over to G7. Let's play that in time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, release. Now the right hand in the next measure, measure 4 of system 3, plays third finger on E, while the left hand goes back to the C major triad twice. Release. Let's play that measure in time. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, release. Now the hard part is stringing these measures together. So let's play measures 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4 with both hands together with no breaks. And of course the right hand plays legato and the left hand has to definitely take the downbeat rest in all 3 measures. Always easier said than done, but let's see what happens. Here we go. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Let's play that 2 more times. 1, 2, and. And one more time, a little bit faster. 1, 2, and. And finally, let's add the first measure so that we can coordinate this entire system with both hands at the same time. Here we go. From the beginning of the third system. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Okay, let me play that one more time without counting. 1, 2, and. now that we've played system 3, we can also play system 4. In fact, we've already played the last 2 measures of system 4, so it's just about making sure that we can repeat the first 3 measures, because they're exactly the same as they are in system 3, and then add this final bit. So let's play each hand separately first. Here is the right hand again for system number 4, the whole time counting. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm slowing down and releasing. Okay, let's get that left hand in once. 1, 2, 3, rest, rest, 2, 3, rest, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. And let's try both hands at the same time for system number 4. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. Okay, I'm going to play it one more time without counting. 1, 2, and. Let's try playing the last 2 systems all in a row. So here we go, piano dynamic, and I'll play it twice, once counting over it, the second time not. 1, 2, and. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, release. And the last time, no counting out loud, except for the preparatory beats, of course. 1, 2, and. Release. Well, it sounds like we've been able to play each half of the piece separately. Let's try the hard part, which is to play the entire piece together. As you might remember from previous lessons, it's easier said than done. Probably a good strategy is to try connecting the last measure of system 2 with the first measure of system 3, just to get that bridge, because there is a noticeable shift, right, from the left-hand melody to the right-hand melody, from mezzo forte to piano. So I'm just going to play this measure and then this measure in time. So remember, the left hand starts with 5, C major triad, then the right hand continues piano with the first part of the melody in system 3, and so on. So let's do that in time. 1, 2, and. Okay, let's do that a couple more times just to get used to it. 1, 2, and. And you can keep going if you wish, but for our purposes, let's just do that one more time to get the connection, and then we'll play the entire piece. 1, 2, and. Okay, I think we're ready to play the whole piece, or I'm ready to play the whole piece, and you try it with me wherever you are. 1, 2, and. Now, I didn't count over it because I've been counting so many times as I've been dissecting this music, that by this point you should really feel comfortable with the rhythms of this piece. In fact, the rhythms here are what's called an pa rhythm. Pa, 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 pa. Or in the last two systems, pa, pa, pa. It's actually a really kind of celebratory, happy rhythm. If you can imagine yourself in a beer garden somewhere, toasting with your beer as you're celebrating life. Something we should try to do pretty often. The celebratory part, not necessarily the drinking beer part. That kind of depends on your preference. But this is where I actually somewhat disagree with the author's tempo indication here of moderately slow. I think this piece should actually be a little bit more lively, again, celebratory. So let me play that one more time in the way that I think it should sound in terms of tempo, and we'll call it a day with this. So celebratory, with a beer in hand, or your drink of choice. 1, 2, and. I hope that felt happy to you. If you want to try playing it faster, by all means, practice away. If you want to be very organized in your practice, use a metronome and set the BPM, the beats per minute, to increasingly faster or higher numbers. So you could try it at a BPM of 60, where each quarter occurs once per second, or even all the way up to, let's say, 120, where every quarter note is once every half second, because you have 120 beats per minute. So it can be very, very fast, but that's really just for practice, because if you're going to perform this piece, ultimately, you have to find a tempo that communicates the emotional intentions and expressivity of this piece clearly. And especially because there are lyrics here, if someone is actually singing, "What can I share with you?" it can't be that fast, because people who sing, singers, have to take breaths, right? So that's another important consideration, which we'll worry about another time. And that was What Can I Share on page 42.